Any questions here after we were out of pads today? We had a pretty good go of it yesterday.
Any concern with Dre?
No, I think he's fine. We in the one-on-one period, he felt it got tight, different area, and so we'll know more. We'll go ahead and have all the precautionary work done, but I think he'll be all right.
When you have to dial it back, I guess by league rule, and it's just good after 3 days. What are you looking for to get out of this? Because
So it needs to be just as much instructional, situational. We spent a lot of time. We spent probably half an hour, maybe 20 minutes on certain cadences, third down cadences, tight red cadences. Still getting the work done. Today was a red zone install, and we'll be back at it tomorrow with the same installation, but. We'll have a walkthrough this evening, and it becomes, it's a little bit more the tempo like, our OTAs if you're watching when you're not in the pads.
You were watching the one-on-ones running backs against the linebackers. What are you looking to see from the running backs in those drills as they develop it?
So when you get into that, it's a 2 times a week type of drill, and you want to make it as realistic as possible, and you're giving them, basically 4 to 5 routes that they would be running. It's man-to-man, so there's some routes the back might run versus zone. You wouldn't work on that. So you're just separation, suddenness, awareness, timing, and the linebackers the same way are working on their leverage. Your H choices, your there's like I said, probably 4 routes that you're working on, and it's technique and then the separation the same way for the linebackers, playing their leverage the right way. It's an 8-minute period that next week we'll go to the same locations and we'll work a pass protection drill where they're rushing and we're protecting, and so it's a call it a technique period.
With a lot of injuries inside linebacker so far, a lot of younger guys have got more.
I don't think. I say this respectfully. I read somewhere where it was like injury plague. Alex is back here in 6 days, so I think obviously other guys step up and get those reps, but knock on wood. Fortunately, we've been good here during this camp, and. But it gives us a chance to evaluate other players, and so you're seeing Bailey. You're seeing the reps of Sternad's obviously had a ton of work, but you do get a chance. And throughout these drills, we're trying to rotate it enough to where getting the proper evaluation on these younger players is important. Our biggest fear would be someone leaves here and ends up excelling somewhere else, and so we want to make sure we don't let that happen.
With this running back group behind RB and Dobbins, what do you think factors most into the guys like Audric and Blake that have had a couple really good days?
Yeah, they had a real good day yesterday. And good question. I mean, look, a lot will go into it. How many are you keeping? Practice squad. Bidet, has had some real good work, and obviously Jaleel. So I think I said this at the start of camp. From experience, a lot of that stuff will sort itself out. And I think you guys, I think I said this, when we finish playing New Orleans, we'll have a better idea of how that's going. And you will have seen more evidence in the games, the joint practices. We're beginning to, all of this stuff matters. Yesterday was one of the better days for some of those guys. And you brought up 2 of them. And Blake, had 2 or 3 exceptional runs. Audric, stacked a couple of days. So, it'll be the body of work.
Sean, big picture, we see some teams, they do 1s versus 2s or 1s versus 3s. You do a lot of 1s versus 1s.
We're 1s, 2s, 3s right now. Saturday, if you recall, a year ago on this Saturday, we set up a much different type practice, and it's kind of a scrimmage format, and yet we'll mix who's going against who. And even within the rotations, if you're really watching, these receivers might be taking reps with the second wave, and they may be taking reps with the first wave just based on the routes that were just run and getting. So it's a little bit easier to keep track of if you're looking at the offensive line. or if you're looking at the defensive front. But we'll try to mix that up, and Saturday will be a day where you'll see that change a little.
I guess you see like a true evaluation when it's best versus best for those.
Yeah, well, I think I'm always used to starting off. I mean, I think when teams scrimmage, a lot of times they'll mix it up with 1s on 2s, and but I thought yesterday, particularly with the physical practice, we've done a good job of working with each other still, staying off the ground, and not getting, past the point where it becomes, more of a health risk. And I thought they did a good job practicing yesterday.
Sean, you've been on the field 8 of the last 9 days. How pleased are you with the energy, and does the focus match the energy?
Yeah, I just said this to them. There are certain goals you have, and as a team, and there appears to be the right mix of youth and then some veteran leadership, and all 32 teams start the season with the same aspirations and goals, and so what separates yourself from those other teams? And I think it's those ingredients, and it gets back to who we're bringing in, who we've drafted, and you're finding guys that want to play at a high level, and they understand that it's not easy to do. We can write down our goals and dreams, and we can recite them, and then you have to live them. And I think I've been encouraged relative to the leadership and the direction following last season. A lot of young guys played, and I've said this before, I like this team.
How is the vision for Jaleel McLaughlin evolving based on his body of work over the last 2 years?
Yeah, well, look, I think, he continues to work on the passing game element relative to what he does. I think he's a change of pace runner. He's got really good quickness and agility. You don't get to appreciate him until it's tackle, and then you appreciate him because he didn't get tackled. It's a little harder, because I can remember the first time in San Francisco where, we're thinking this is going to be a good young practice squad developmental back, and 100 and some yards later, he's not going to get to any practice squad. So I think you appreciate, and it gets back to that position, you get to see a little bit more when it's tackle and their yards after contact, how do they go down, all those other things.
We've asked you about Zack Allen in the past. You talked about his motor, his energy. How unique is his versatility and where he's able to line?
I think it's a strength. I'm not making the comparison relative to the positions they play. Cam Jordan plays a different position, but Cam had the unique ability on play 72. It looked like play 8, and I'd say Zack has that stamina and that cardio where, he's in great shape, but when you look at the tape, it's hard to play in the offense or defensive front, especially the defensive front, a lot of snaps like that. And it's one of his strengths. And the versatility.
Right, to move like that. Is that unique when you watch film?
Yeah, there's some players that have that versatility. His football IQ obviously is very good. And so he becomes an impactful player.
With the amount on today's plate right now, just kind of working inside, outside, what is the balance for you guys as a staff of knowing, hey, he's got this versatility, it's a strength of his, but also making sure he can play?
Yeah, I think one of his strengths is he's exceptionally bright, like extremely football smart. You're seeing things that he's doing in disguise that you'd see from a veteran, at the nickel position. Not so much outside, but yeah, I think that his athleticism and his football IQ, you don't feel a rookie when it comes to the things that we're doing right now. And so there are times where you may draft someone and you wouldn't have that same luxury.
We have the NFL officials in today. Anything you want to talk to them about regarding rules changes or points?
So here's what happens. The officials get in the night before. Every year they'll have a video. They'll show the team. And then they'll, in the team meeting, talk about the rule changes, points of emphasis. This year was a little calmer. The big one was The kickoff now, into the end zone will be brought to the 35. So obviously we're going to see more kick returns, line of scrimmage, points of emphasis, those type of things. And then the best thing that we get out of it, when we have like a league crew like this, is the communication out here. And then even in the meetings, they'll go to the individual meetings and they'll talk about the penalties they call, but they'll also answer questions in those meetings. And so that 3 days of being here hands-on, it starts with the evening meeting, and it's been pretty standard for as long as I can remember. They'll show a video and then go through the rule changes. Some years, the other one that's important, obviously, to know is the regular season overtime is just now like the postseason. So there's a 10-minute time cap, but that each team's going to have a chance to possess the ball regardless of what happens with the first possession. And if you recall, a year ago, that was the postseason. In the regular season, you could still have a drive, touchdown, end of game. So making sure everyone's on the same page there. It's great to have a crew here and work with them, and I think it's good for those guys as well. I think they get better for it.
Sean, last year when we talked about the kickoff, wanted to see how it was going to play out in the preseason and early in the year, and then remember you talking about it being needed maybe be more punitive. So do you feel better about the 35? Is that the
well? I think I was in favor of the 35, and because I think there were teams still taking the approach, we'll defend the 30-yard line as a start point. The kickoffs and the play itself and the returns spike way up regardless. I think that, it's hard as a coach to say I'm comfortable with them starting on the 35-yard line. I'm going to want to defend that field position. And I think it benefits us based on our talent, our returners, our coaching. We feel like we'll benefit from that, and we're all a little bit smarter or more experienced relative to how those returns begin to look from this time last year.
You talked about young talent on your coaching staff, and that there are guys that you think will someday be coaches.
Yeah.
When you're just around the building, what are the sorts of things you see in a young coach that make you say that he might stand in front of a,
Yeah, good question. Sometimes, it would be the presence in front of a room when they present, their knowledge, work ethic. It's hard to predict, and I would say it's not just offense, defense, or special. I mean, future head coaches can come from any one of those areas, and I've been lucky enough to have a guy like Dan Campbell and now Aaron Glenn, and guys like that have that opportunity, and I want that for all these guys. I really do. Last year we lost a handful of coaches. We'll see Johnny Morton call in place tonight for Detroit. Declan Doyle in Chicago, and then AG was able to hire our special teams. So that is a bit of an unusual offseason to lose three like that. And yet I'm excited for them. And so back to the traits, there's a skill set, a communication skill set. There's a number of things that give them a chance. And ultimately, you got to be in place where you're winning. If you're in a program where you're having success, generally your coaches are going to get taken from that program, and understandably so. I was in New Orleans one year early on. I think it was after the 06 season. Mr. Benson, the late Mr. Benson, came to me and he said, "Coach, we got a lot of assistants interviewing for jobs. What do you think of all that?" And I said, "Well, I would worry a lot more if no one was interested, in our coaches." So I think it's a good thing.
Obviously, you want to find playing talent, but what goes into searching for coaching talent and also creating an environment where coaches want to come here because they know they can get better and grow and flourish as coaches?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it. When I was younger, you feel more in tune to guys that you would hire, and they're in positions where you can hire them. As you get older, all of those, let's say, peers are in positions under contract or retired. And so it becomes more challenging where I'm listening to Jim Leonard recommend, I'm listening to Zack, any number of the assistants have a strong regard for someone. I want to know, because the volume of talent that I once knew is diminished, that are in positions. And I think one of the things that, it took a minute in New Orleans, year one, 2006 was 5 months after Katrina. We were just talking about it. Bill Kolar was out here, and you guys have been around him. And so he was a big recruit. I've got him in. There's tarps on the buildings. And then I'm driving him from New Orleans the second day to the Senior Bowl, and there's a boat on the side of the road. And Kolar finally says, "Coach, there's no way in hell I can take this job. You know that." He goes, "And I love you," he said, "but I'm not." And so we were that first year really scrambling to try to find, every person we hired ended up being clear promotions with more money, and we weren't winning any jump balls. And eventually that began to switch. But here, again, it's kind of like what we discussed with free agency, that, this is an attractive spot. And so you can win a lot of the jump balls if you're competing against two other teams. I think ownership has a lot to do with that. Stability has a lot to do with that. It's to each his own, though, relative to where people want to live. But back to the procurement of those coaches, you rely on that, and then the interview, and you do a lot of research, and it's easy to hire a coach. It's not easy to hire, an exceptional one. You have to work on that, and sometimes be willing to accept that they're at the college level and they're going to become this. And I've had a lot of success. I've been fortunate to have gotten a number of guys that went on to be real good NFL coaches. And it's always something every year, right? I mean, it's, you get a call and man, all of a sudden, like, I counted on Declan Doyle for another at least 3 years, at least when he starts shaving. But you're happy for him.
Sean, you're always talking about being teachers first. How hard is it to identify if a guy's going to be a good teacher?
Well, so you spend time in the interview with that. We'll ask them to install, present. I mean, you spend a lot of time on that. Good communicator. What's their personality like? You don't need everyone with the same personality, but ultimately you're looking for leadership traits and guys that can communicate. And then I would say the other thing that is undervalued is compatibility. I think it's very important, that the guys fit in well with the staff, and there are times where when that's not the case, it becomes a headache. And so that compatibility, all of those things.
Have you ever had that, a really good coach you didn't think was wrong with people?
Yeah.
Is that hard?
That is. And then it's kind of like buying bread with no preservatives. It might just be a 2-year shelf life. and you're okay with it.
Yesterday's practice was a little chippy. Guys going at it. Ended up with Marvin Mims calling Roach fat on the podium.
Yeah. I don't think of Roach as fat, but Malcolm, you hear him before you see him, and I like that energy about him. I thought the thing I liked about yesterday, it was a physical practice, and yet there was no one really crossing the line, and it's hard to do when it gets warm, but I thought both sides of the ball, handled the pads well. We got better yesterday, and so today was going to be, a day where they were a little bit tired, and you just got to be smart with the approach during practice. But Yeah, I wouldn't have picked Mims and Roach. Like, I would have picked so many other combos, but when I read that one, that was like surprising.
Might have been the Oklahoma, Texas.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
it not rolling over in terms of tempers, in terms of scuffles and fights, is that kind of a testament to the seriousness these guys are kind of really locked in?
Yeah, I think you ever go to the grocery store and you see like a 5-year-old just being a terror, and you don't really look at the 5-year-old, you look at the parent. And so I think it's up to us as coaches to clearly identify what we're looking for. And one of the things that I enjoyed and appreciated a lot as a young coach is when we had joint practices with New England. And I think we had 4 or 5 of them in those 17 years. And not one, and I knew Bill well enough, but like our players dreaded it because, man, as a young coach, I didn't want it to be our team, with Bill. And so once we had that experience, it was easy to say, let's do it again. And there was never, both teams were like, hey, we're here to get better, and we're not going to end up, on NFL Network with one of these bench clearing. We're just not going to do it. And so I think that points to not just the head coach, but the collective group of coaches, no different to that parent on aisle 8. Get your kid out of the cereal boxes.